everyone, and welcome to our opening day of Connecting to Our Common Ground. My name is Julia Kemmer. I'm the Director of Art and Administration here at Brushwood Center, and it's truly a joy to welcome you here today. This exhibition marks the start of our 40th annual Smith Nature Symposium series. Every year, the symposium celebrates leaders in the environmental movement and highlights their work and causes. This year, we are honoring author, cultural activist, and Emmy-nominated host and executive producer of PBS's America Outdoors, Baratunde Thurston. In his show, Baratunde visits Americans from different backgrounds and areas of the country to talk about and experience their unique relationships with the outdoors through the lens of their culture. Here at Brushwood, we consider having a relationship with nature to be an integral part of human well-being. But just as Baratunde does, we also recognize that this connection can take different forms for different people. So in this companion exhibition, we wanted to explore this idea further by highlighting the ways that artists from different communities, backgrounds, and disciplines experience the natural world and how that relationship manifests in their artwork. We're going to get a chance to hear from a few of our artists today, but first I wanted to acknowledge and thank our partners on this exhibition, the Hyde Park Art Center, and also thank you to my co-jurors, Samantha Fox and Patrick McCoy, for helping to put this exhibition together. Thanks. Now I'd like to introduce our artists. So on the far end, we have Sheri Rush, whose large canvases can be seen along the hallway leading to this room. She is a Chicago-based painter whose work responds to the current world by considering the intersection of identity, landscape, and the digital image. And next we have Renee Robbins, whose work is on either side behind us, and she creates detailed visual environments that consider the complex relationships between humans, nature, and the cosmos. And then lastly, Preston Thomas, whose work is along the wall to your left. And he is a Chicago photographer who works in both film and digital and believes in using deliberate composition to communicate stories. And I'll begin with Baratunde's question and ask each of you, what is your connection to nature and why is it important to you?
Mine's kind of multi-layered. For me, it's always been my refuge and my solace. I was raised in Texas. My family had a farm in Central Texas. And my identity is my DNA is in that land. And even though I haven't been to Texas, I've been over 40 years. I had a relationship, identity and place had a huge relationship to me from a very early time, very early life.
I've always been really inspired by nature, and it just brings a sense of wonder and curiosity about the world. And that's why I choose to be inspired by unseen nature in my artwork. I look at a lot of different lenses to look at images of nature, whether that's a magnifying glass, a microscope, a telescope or binoculars, a camera lens, or a video device. These are all tools that we use to look at, understand the world, and how all of these parts of our universe work. And I see a lot of poetry in the interrelationships in nature, from the very smallest subatomic particle to cells, plants, and animals. I'm very interested in biology and how we as humans interact with animals, also plants. All of these things are part of my visual toolbox that I abstract and layer in the artwork. So from the smallest cell to the planets in the cosmos and the stars, my work takes images and layers all these different parts of our human experience together to create new configurations and new environments that I see as fantastical. But the main thing that I want to convey in my artwork is to create wonder and deepen our own connection with the world.
Wonderful. Now, Preston, what about you?
Well, for me, as a city boy, you know, it's all one big canvas. You know, my exploration of things, and I'm drawn to the water, always drawn to the water. Though weirdly, I'm one of those Chicagoans who doesn't go to the Chicago beach, because who does that? I can only go to the beach when I'm on vacation. Anyway, but I'm always drawn to the water and found spaces, and not very, you know, I guess a cityscape photographer. I didn't study photography formally. I, you know, read copious Ansel Adams, and then pivoted from that to Van der Zee and Gordon Parks, and, you know, became more of a student of my surroundings, you know. So my environment is, you know, found spaces in and around the city. Also, with Chicago being such a populous place, when I find spaces that are bereft of people, it takes on sort of a sound and a feeling. It's almost as though I can hear the space because the people aren't there, you know. And I can stand in these spaces and make photographs, and I can visit the same space like 10, 15 times and have 10 or 15 different photographs, you know. So that's sort of been, and as I mentioned to someone else before, I'm one of those people who ignores the danger, do not enter, possible death sign, and crawl because I'm down for a little possible death. So, I mean, just recently, just not, you know, steps from my house, we're on the lakefront in Hyde Park, but there's a fence that just looks like, as my mother would say, God damn it, I'll bite you, right? It just looks like the worst thing, you never want to go through it. But I could see that someone had crawled through, so I decided I would crawl through it. And I go back there and I find like all of this stuff that people have been doing, and I don't know how long it's been there, painting stuff, things they've written about, things that they're experiencing. And this is only possible, I believe, that if you think about your surroundings as this ever-evolving canvas that, you know, is changed by the presence of people. It's, you know, maybe it's weirdly anthropological in some ways, you know, and I capture these things. And that's what drives me. It's, you know, whether it's the Chicago lakefront, or even when I was down in you know, Cuba, down in Havana, you know, that kind of, I realized it was really the same approach, you know, just finding these spaces and, you know, making work from them. And then my approach to shooting, as in my bio, you know, the discipline of analog is greater than the anarchy of digital, which is to say that you should bring to it, I still pick up my digital camera. I shoot film and digital, but I pick up my digital cameras and I approach it as though I have a roll of 36 exposures in there. And I shoot with intent. You know, I walk into a space and I begin, and this gets into a larger argument about, you know, whether photography is art. But there are some instances where I am actively composing, you know, the way I frame a space. And, you know, if I'm waiting, like if I know that at some point the water is going to do a thing, and so I need to settle in. I'm not going to shoot like 500 shots if I'm going to wait and go, okay, it looks like this thing is getting ready to happen. And, you know, so I become a student of the environment, a student of the behavior of the water on the lakefront, or like what, you know, when exactly is golden hour today, and what's this thing going to look like at golden hour, you know. And it was something I had a shoot in Joshua Tree some time ago, and I was telling a friend, I said, well, you know, we don't need to go out there at this time of day because everything looks perfectly flat and beige. But there's going to be an hour during the day where this entire desert becomes like just this candy, this bowl of candy. Like all these greens are going to be like super emerald green, and the thing that looks like kind of like clay right now is going to be like this vibrant red, and it's going to last for a little while, and we're going to do all of our shooting in here, and then we can go home. You know, so I mean, I'm actively composing, so there's kind of like that argument. And then the next thing I would say is that, you know, my wife told me not to ramble, so I'm going to stop. And, you know, she's sitting there with a timer in her hand right now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned sound, because that was one of the things that struck me with your pieces, is that I can hear them. Yes. I hear the water crashing. I hear the snow crunching under your feet. You know, and it was just, you know, there's such a stillness, yet such a loud sound that comes from them. And, you know, since your pieces, at least from what I gather, are supposed to be narrative, can you tell us maybe the stories behind these moments that you've captured?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sure. So these photographs, so this is from a body of work called Morning Prayer Lake. And it's been going on probably for about 10 years. And yet trying to pull 3 pieces from it, when Patrick was talking to me, I called him up, I said, it's only 3? We can only do 3? Because, it's kind of like, as I mentioned earlier, it's like trying to snatch 3 pages out of the Iliad and tell the story, because I've been shooting for 10 years. So this photograph here is the morning my mother passed. And the reason there's a lot of winter stuff. I am not a fan of cold weather by any stretch of the imagination. But when my mother went into the hospital, and if you've lost a parent, you kind of know how it feels when, all right, these hospital visits are becoming longer and more frequent. And even when they're home, they're not really with you, and you can kind of feel them slipping away. That's what was going on. So this is winter of 2013. And I started getting up in the morning and going down to the lakefront. This is 31st Street. And I would make these photographs. And this is that first polar vortex that we talked about. So I would make these photographs until I couldn't really hold the camera anymore. And I would get in the car and go home, and weirdly, I would feel better after doing that. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this, and my wife, and they're like, oh, that's your church. Mm-hmm. Which is why I renamed this body of work Morning Prayer Lake. So, we would start with that one. We can make it. Anyway, so it just became like a regular, this weird sort of pilgrimage where I would just go down there and I would make these photographs. And there are so many stories behind this. And the people that you meet who show up in this terribly minus 23-degree weather, those are some special folks. And the conversations that you have with people, and most of the time, again, it's bereft of people. And so if somebody's out there, they're out there for a reason. They're not like, oh, I just decided to walk the dog over here so that he will be a popsicle when I get home, and then that will be that. So we got the call at 4 a.m., and we went to the hospital, and then I left and drove straight there and, caught that. So that's 2014, February 3rd, 2014. The second one is another polar vortex, but 2019, because, the more painful the weather, that's for me. And it was kind of the same, it's become sort of a regular haunt for me. I haunt those spaces between 31st and 39th Street. And I see it differently every time. And this is what I was talking about when I'm sitting there going, okay, I know the water's gonna do a thing. And, I'm just gonna wait until it happens, and maybe I'll survive, maybe I won't. But, I'm gonna wait until it happens. And then just at the moment, the geese did me a solid and flew right into the frame. And I got that photograph, and I went home after that because I kind of felt like, okay, this is what I came out here for. And it still makes me feel the same way to this day. I go out there, I have conversations with my mom, I talk with her a little bit, I make some photographs, I get in the car, and I've transitioned, as you know, from coffee to whiskey now. That's literally my thing for this body of work.
Well, let's move to Sheri. Sheri, your pieces are abstract, but they're actually. Would it be fair to say that they're actually abstract modern landscapes? Because it seems like you're kind of inspired by what you see out in nature, and then you translate it into your own special language on the canvas.
Well, yes and no. I actually, I really get everything he's saying because I work in photographs, so I haunt places too, and I refer to my projects as journeys because each of them is a journey somewhere that I've just meticulously documented, devoid of humankind, completely examining and archiving. And the whole process of shooting and archiving is really huge in my practice. And then I guess I go to a more abstract language when I can. But they come, the two paintings are from different series that have their own experiences, Sanctum is taken from, I did a residency in 2019 in Pooch Cove, Newfoundland. And I was completely secluded. And I mean, like, there wasn't even a coffee shop, okay? I mean, it was just like, you're secluded. You cannot go anywhere. So I hiked every day and took my photos, waited for nature to reveal itself and everything else. Unfortunately, I was contemplating my mother at that time, and she passed before I could make it home. So it's, and then the other one is unique. That series of work is all done. It was after a polar vortex. I had to fly to Florida. And I found myself in a tropical forest down there in the heat. And that trip was all about transformation. I was going to a facility called Refuge to spend family time with my godchild who was in rehab. And I was taking the pictures, for the first time I was taking the pictures while I was actually driving the car. I used to take pictures as the passenger, but I took it from the driver's side, so I caught the interior of the car. And I decided to keep it because that trip was about the interior and the exterior world all melding together and a transformation occurring, and a clarity that had come over the kids I met there. And so yeah, it's a little bit of both. Since I do work in photographs, I do definitely have my own language of abstraction.
Right. And your pieces are on the larger side for what we typically show here because we were limited by the architecture. But for you, they're not large.
No, I was just getting ready for a show that is all about 6 by 8 feet and 6 by 7 feet. And that's again from the Newfoundland source material, and but I decided to go to a less heavier kind of feeling, that because nature is my refuge and it's the way I process the world, and then painting is the way I process everything. So the show now is more kind of taking the good feelings, and it's more of a enchanted forest. So yeah, those are small.
Yeah, right. And Renee, so from what you've been saying, it seems like you have a really strong interest in science as well as nature. So did you come to science by way of art or to art by way of science?
I think I came to art by way of science. As a young girl, I really wanted to be a marine biologist.
Wow.
I was super obsessed learning about all the creatures that live in the sea. Science is a deep passion of mine, and it really inspires my artwork. Part of my process is learning about all the different creatures, plants, botanicals, flowers, learning about them and their habitats is just something that is really inspiring to my artwork.
Mm-hmm. And so would you say that a lot of the forms in your pieces are from real creatures and plants, or are they part of your imagination?
Both. So like Sheri, I look at photographs and magazines. Some of the photographs I take myself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm flipping through National Geographic. I also look at YouTube videos of creatures that live in the deep sea. It's a hobby of mine to it really just excites me to learn about these animals and the different habitats that they live in. And this piece to the left of me is part of a series called Biota, where I invented my own biome or my own ecosystem. And the book that I have over here, it has all the paintings within that series, but that series imagines this biome that I created and how it starts, like the beginning of this universe, and also the end, and how that biome changes over time. So there's a lot of the same colors, a lot of these transparent rainbow glazes. All the pieces start with a very light blue color, and then I'm layering these tan shapes and putting meticulous details and patterns over them. So there's a lot of the same kind of creatures within that series that I'm moving and shifting from where they might be in the ocean and then having them travel all the way out into space. So there's this change in scale in the painting, and then also the paintings together tell a story of this invented biome. So there's a mix in, when I start a painting, I usually don't have any idea of what I'm gonna do. So I start it completely with abstract gestures and layering very thin acrylic paint. And then as I start to build those layers, that's when I'm bringing in specific sources. So there's usually something real in all of my paintings, but I like that it can be sort of mysterious, that the viewer can bring their own interpretations to the forms, that they look like something, but I like them to be a little hard to decode or figure out. Sometimes I even layer molecular patterns in my pieces, invented star constellations, sometimes the zodiacs as well.
That's wonderful. Well, I'd like to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions for our artists here today. Yes, Laura.
You said that you took photos from the inside of your car.
I did.
So I do that a lot, and that's why I'm going to ask you, while you're driving.
Okay. As I said, I had never done it. None of them were done, but that time I was deep in forest with no one around, and it was at a god awful hour of the morning with the sun coming out. And I thought, I got to shoot this. And then I thought, no one's around. So I just kind of went for it.
But you stopped your car probably. Or did you not?
Not so much.
You go, girl.
It's dangerous.
I slowed down. I'm sorry.
I'd just like to chime in and go, if you can't shoot while you're driving, then what's the point?
That's right.
I have a number of photographs under questionable circumstances.
You got to get the shot.
Gotta get the shot. It's not gonna wait for you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Well, I wanted to ask Preston about that area from 39th to 31st Street, which you go back to all the time. And then I want to flip it over to Julia, because he was telling me out in the hallway about a space that he was using as his reference, that had the same sort of spatial dimension as what you're talking about from 31st to 39th Street. You still go down there?
Yeah, almost exclusively. I've been expanding a bit farther south because it becomes more industrial along the lakefront, and so that's very interesting. But that's more like a reconnaissance mission. You know, you're going to see what's there. I think that what we've all talked about, especially with spaces, is that you can walk into a space or stand in a space and it resonates for some reason or other. You can walk into someone's house that you've never met and feel great, or feel like I need to get the hell out of here now. You know, and somewhere, I mean, you know, people that you never had a conversation with feel like a brother or a sister, you know, that kind of thing. And I think that the landscape is the same way. You know, I mean, I don't really see, and this probably is more with your work, I don't see a disconnect down in the, you know, in the particulates and the molecular part of it. We're all a part of this.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we've been socialized to believe that we aren't, but we are all a part of this. This, the, you know, the water, the land, even I mean, we live in Hyde Park on built up ground that wasn't even there before, and I'm pretty sure the lake would like that land back at some point. It's going to take that part back. But that, I don't know why I went to 31st Street. I'm not. I mean, like I said, I don't really go. I'm not a beach guy here, you know. But for some reason, the boat docks there, and the layout of it, you know, it spoke to me. And even, I mean, I can go anywhere. Like, I mean, I ride my bike all the way up to the Hyde Temple. but I shoot between 31st and 39th. And then when I go beyond it, I can see spaces that they're aesthetically attractive, but they don't speak to me. You know, I'm like, oh, this is a nice part of the lakefront. Oh, this looks great over here, but I don't reach for my camera.
The
You
piece
know.
that you have out in the hallway has a portion of the skyline in there.
So he's talking there. I have a black and white piece hanging over the food back there. So on that day, the low temperature was minus 23. At the time I was out there, I think it was minus 15 or something like that. I go down there with my camera and I shoot manual lenses and old lenses on my Pentax. And I'm out there, and there are these three people out there. And I said these are special people, right? Because you know it's crazy. And I can see them walking, and this is a composition. I can see them walking along the curve at about 39th Street, where you know the terra firma. I don't know what it is. It does, you know, they're like these three legs, and it curves like that. As you know, it's beautiful. And I started to follow them. I said, no, I'm going to let them walk. And they're coming toward. I can see that now. I have the skyline in the frame. So this is me actively composing and waiting for them to get to a point. There's a little outcrop where I'm going to make the photograph, and I'm talking to myself like, if one of you all turns and goes someplace else, I will kill you. I'm waiting on this thing to happen. And they get down there to a point, and I've got everything in there I want. I've got the skyline on the left-hand side. They are center, and then you've got like what's happening over the water with the water vapor and everything coming up, and they're right there. And then that photograph is about scale because they're like about this, but they're clearly identifiable. And then you've got everything going on there, and it was just again, I don't feel that anyplace else. I can't see myself making that photograph anyplace else, you know. So.
Oh, wonderful.
Could I ask Julian? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You asking me a question?
I was going out in the hallway. You started talking about one of your paintings, and it's about the same concept that there's a space between what you said, Katie and Lasky that resonated with you.
Yeah, I live out in the south suburbs, and it's a space that I go through every day on Balmer Road, in between Kedzie and Pulaski, wide open space. Like Thomas, city boy, you know, skyscrapers, concrete, all that stuff. But in the early 2000s, I moved out there and things just opened up. And it's only like 2 or 3 spots out in that area that I made a series of probably like 15 or 20 paintings out of. You know, those paintings derived from just those 3 spots. And the reason being is because any time of the day, you know, they look different. They change. And then when the season changes too, on top of the time of the day, I got another painting, you know? But I didn't take pictures of them. I just kept them in my head because I wanted to rely on what I remembered. And so that was new for me because I relied heavily on photographs. But I really cherished the idea of relying on what I had, you know, coming out of my head and how it spoke to me. Like you were saying, so much stuff that you say, Thomas, that I can relate to, you know.
It's all copyrighted. Just in case you're thinking about using it someplace.
And I have one question for the 3 of you, if I may.
Absolutely.
Andrew Wyatt once said, "One's art goes as far and as deep as one love goes." What do you think about that?
I think it's right.
I mean, do you think of anything that you have sacrificed as far as your safety or your being comfortable or whatever to capture something, to get something?
I never.
And I say this because Thomas mentioned something about being in, where were you at? You went somewhere and you went under this fence and
Oh yeah.
you sacrificed your safety.
Oh, This one right here will tell you a lot more. I think, I mean, I don't, were you finished with your?
Yeah, I mean, I pursue, in a lot of bad weather I almost got blown off the cove one time going up the East Coast Trail in Newfoundland. But I would say, and we all sacrifice our security and money
Yes.
to
Yes. Yes. And and with regard to love, you have to, this is all about, I mean, it's been argued that the act of creation, if you are a religious person, is, an attempt to emulate God, right? And I mean, I'm not, I'm a heathen, so I'm not in church, I'm not in Sunday school, but I understand the analogy, right? If you think of God as the creator of all things, then your attempt to create something is attempting to emulate, like trying to emulate a parent, right? And where children try to emulate their parents. But I think that you can only do these things if there is a passion and a love, the ability to love. You have to love it. Nobody becomes an artist because you want to make a bunch of money, right? Nobody. That's like at the bottom of the list, right? And really it just says be Monet. It doesn't say be an artist. It's like be Monet, but don't die first, right? That's just that. It's just that. You have to have a capacity to love, and I don't mean love in the Lifetime movie sense of things, but I mean you have to feel it. I mean you have to be like Coltrane, shutting himself off from his family, while he works on A Love Supreme, where Alice is sliding his food under the door. I can see myself now. I wish I would tell my wife, I'm sliding my food under the door. I'm not coming out. No, but I get, what I mean? But you have to have that in you to believe that this is the thing that you have to do.
Right.
It's like, and I don't think that we just get up and go, let's see, what could I do today? It's kind of like you're driven to do it. You can't help yourself.
Survive.
You gotta. I mean, and I'm thinking about like just how granular you got just talking about your piece over there, and I'm like, okay, that's down in it, like that. I mean, that's really down in it, where like, and let's say the phone rings while you're doing something like that, and all you can think about is just like destroying the phone. Be honest, we've all had that moment.
I turn it off.
Yeah,
I turn
it's
it off
like
when I paint.
there you have to have a capacity to go there, and not everybody has a capacity to do that kind of thing.
Right.
And it comes pluses and minuses. It comes with sacrifice, I believe.
Yeah, and kind of jumping on what you were saying, painting, I paint what I love. And also, like you were talking about the spaces that speak to you. To me, it's the different scales of our universe really speak to me, and learning about them. And I deeply love all these parts of our experience that are just out of view. So bringing light to the unseen universe. And in terms of sacrificing like your safety, I've done some large scale works in public, and that is a very strange experience when you're painting on a street and there's cars going by and people are yelling at you, thank you, and they want to talk to you while you're painting, which is part of the fun of public art. And then it's loud, and you're out there sweating, painting this big wall, and you're driving a lift down the street to the Lincoln Park Zoo, and you didn't realize you had to put gas in it so it breaks down in the middle of the street, and all the traffic is going by. That was kind of funny.
And you're just making all this up, right? This
I
didn't
just
actually
made
happen,
it
right?
so that so you're painting in public, the lift breaks down in traffic, and you gotta call someone to help you out and bring you gas.
Very true.
But I love it. It's when it's fun. It's a different experience to do that for sure. So you just have to. You're like, it's almost like a performance art in a way when you're painting a large scale mural in public.
Thanks, Sheri, Preston, and Renee.
Thanks for that question.
Yes.
So Preston is my family, so I know a little bit of his answer to this. So I'm curious for.
Cheating.
Well, you're the reason I'm inspired by this question. But so each of you have described, right, like this interest in finding things and finding places that are bereft of people. But sometimes I'm sure that happens by chance, but sometimes I'm sure you make it happen. So I'm curious, like, what are your cues to try and find a place, or like, what are your instincts, or how do you go about finding a place that may not have the people in it? Like, how do you feel like, something whispers in your ear, or are you like, oh, I'm going here today?
When I shoot, I'm usually on a journey doing something, and it happens, I think I seek out solitude, and you don't really discover a place; you just find it. I mean, that's not how it goes. It goes. There's a quote, but I can't think of it right now. But it's something that reveals itself. And I truly am doing something. Something happens where I look up and I'm like, whoa, and I think it all started. I started shooting my family's farm. I shot the land for 25 years, twice a year, different seasons, and worked solely from that work for half my career. I started shooting in grad school in the fields when they did the hay, and I would set up the hay into little drama scenes. And all the farmers in the country were going nuts and doing something demonic or something. I don't know. So I think I seek it out,
Well, and I think I have certain things that I keep coming back to, like recurring motifs, and things that I'm really interested in, like bioluminescence. Like, I love the jellyfish and the patterns that they make when they're trying to attract a mate. In the same way, I'm interested in the fireflies, and different species of fireflies make different marks when they fly through the sky. Some make a J, some make a dash, some make a dot, and I don't have those paintings here, but that is another recurring pattern in my work. But I think it goes back to this love or sense of mystery or the poetry that I find in images, and then also finding fun ways to layer them and to create shapes and new patterns inspired by these things that I find and learn about.
I got to answer anyway. Well, for me, I think it has a lot. Also, you tend to gravitate toward the things that are already going on in your head in the first place. When you walk out the house, it's not really happenstance. You're heading in a direction for one reason or another because it's already inside of you. And for me, I seek out these spaces, and weirdly, it's like other people know it. I have a photograph that I made when I was down in Cuba, or La Habana. They won't let me say Cuba. They say I can say Cuba. I'm walking down the street, and I have my camera with me, and I'm walking with a few other folks. And this guy, everything behind Cuba, if you've never been there, it's beautiful buildings, but it's all behind scaffolding and corrugated metal, and you can't really see it, can't really get into these spaces. And this guy is standing in front of this building, and he sees me with my camera, and he's like that. And, and for those of you all who don't know, that's like the universal conversation for Black people, which means turn around. Anyway, so he's like, you don't believe me? Test it. You walking down the street, somebody does. Every Black person goes. It's true. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. And that's exactly what I did. Everybody else kept walking. I was like. And he didn't really speak English, and he points to his eyes and he points to this door. All right. And I go, okay, this is either going to be amazing or I'm going to be robbed, but there'll be a story. Something's going to happen. And he pulls back this corrugated metal and he pushes open this wooden door, and I'm presented with this utterly beautiful cathedral which no one is using. There's no one in there. It's like, and outside on the street, you know, it's loud, it's cacophonous and everything, and then you walk into this space and you could just hear a pin drop. And he's really proud of himself. He just goes, you know, like that, and he steps back, and I sit down on the floor, and I prop the camera on my lap because I needed a tripod, and he didn't care. And he didn't care. And I thought about, like, why of all the people walking up and down the street with their cameras, you know, why did he reach out to me and go, okay, this person is going to love this space. And it's because I think we carry these things around with us, you know, like we can only be who we are, right? And if things are, you know, going the way they should go, those kinds of people gravitate towards you, and you gravitate to these spaces. Like I don't have the ability to kick the people off the beach,
Yeah.
right? You know,
I wish I did.
they're often in the way.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to have that bathing suit on either. Anyway, so, you know, they're often in the way, but I can't. But somehow I find these spaces. You find your spaces. You find your spaces, and it kind of occurs to me that you're working like at both scales of like infinity, right? You're all the way out in the cosmos, but then you're down here where it can just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. You're covering a lot of ground there. Okay, right.
You know what, I would say also, there's an extension to that story. You know, the story that you just told about the church and
Yes.
God having a community. Because, you know, I don't believe that things happen just by coincidence. You go in there and you take that picture, and then years later, you have an exhibition, and what happens?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'll continue. Don't bring your wife to an exhibit. So I made that photograph, and that was 2014 that I made, because after this, and I was a mess after I lost my mother, and a friend of mine suggested that we go to Cuba, which is the strangest thing I'd ever heard. But yeah, I mean, like, you're feeling down, let's go to Cuba. Okay. But we did. That is literally what happened. We go to Cuba. So I take this photograph. Years later, actually, 2018, 2019, having a solo exhibit for my work from Cuba. I'm still setting up because I'm amazed that you all got this off on time. This is amazing because I've never been to one that started on time ever. It's like you're still hanging stuff when people are coming in, right? You know? So I'm up on a ladder trying to get the lighting right on a piece, and this woman comes in. You know, very, very. She's got on like business cash, very, you know, looked very well put together, older woman, right? And she's walking around, you know, and she stops in front of the piece of the cathedral. And I look at her, I say, okay, I'll go over and introduce myself. And by the time I get down off the ladder, she's crying. And I introduce myself, and I took a picture, and she's like, my parents were married in this cathedral. We left La Habana when I was 4 years old, and I have not seen it since. And so now, right, everybody's like, oh, well, thank you for coming to my show. And so, I do the show. It goes where I always give a little talk afterwards about, like, you know, like we're doing now. In the middle of it, she stands up and begins to sing this song about love and loss of La Habana. And at first, everyone's like, what is happening, right? What's going on? Totally unscripted. By the time she's done, everybody's just like wiping their face and all this other kind of thing. And the emotion carries through. Like, how does that happen? Of course, I haven't been able to show since then, because if no one comes in and starts crying at my show, I'll be a failure. So, but I mean, that was amazing. Like 2014, and then 2019, here this woman comes and she walks in. Here's the cathedral my parents were married in, and we had to leave. You know, I've never seen it since. You know, and I had nothing. I couldn't curate that if I tried, right? But I think the work that we do, you know, things. I mean, I know you believe this, Patrick. The way, if you've never seen the inside of Patrick's home, it is literally art from floor to ceiling, no exaggeration. And I'm on the ceiling, bathrooms, everything. I thought he was exaggerating until I was like, oh no, you're serious. But you can feel it. It knocks you. You need to take a breather. And I think the work we create, your pieces and all. I'm jealous of the size at which you can work. I'm trying, because I want to work at that scale, right? You know, that kind of thing. And when I was looking at your piece, I was going to ask you, does what you were saying about the growth of it, is the part in the middle a more mature part then, since the other one started
Yes.
at
that comes as I'm I layer the background first, and then I kind of created that form and layered the patterns on top. And usually it starts with a flat shape that I'm layering different patterns on top.
Yeah, 'cause you were just talking about how they start. And so I think that if you're, and people have to be open to it, right? You know, I mean, there are folks who walk by stuff every day and they never see anything, you know, or it was a line from Superman, you know, some people can read the back of a gum wrapper and unlock the secrets of the world, right? You know, and people look at War and Peace and go, that's a nice little book. A little light reading, you know. Anyway, all right.
I have
Thanks.
one last question,
Absolutely.
and I'll leave alone. For you again, Preston.
It's like an intervention.
Sally Mann once took a series of photographs of cadavers deteriorating in the ground, which I would imagine would put her in a very uncomfortable position. Could you put yourself in a position to do something that's disturbing like that? And if you could, what do you think you can gain from that or get out of that?
The closest I've come to that kind of work is, so I have a problem with street photographers, which is this kind of run and gun, you know, photographing somebody else's circumstance with like knowing absolutely nothing about the person. You know, it's weird. It's a weird violation to me, you know. So the people I photograph, 99% of them I've had a conversation with. And one day I was on Kingsbury, not far from the East Bank Club, and I was photographing down the river. And this guy walks up to me and he starts talking to me about how the lights on the Boeing building change. And I said, oh no, I've never seen that because I'm not, you know, here at night. And he's telling me what happens and all this other kinds of thing. And while we're talking, I happen to look down and I see this palette and this dish and this stuff. And I go, oh, he knows about the Boeing building because he's living under this bridge. But he's talking to me, you know, just like we ran into each other in Starbucks or something like that, right? But I'm gonna leave here and go do my thing. And he's going to go and get whatever he can get and go back down here and go to bed. And like even now, the realization of that, I tried my best to just keep my poker face, you know. But I'm, you know, and I wrote a whole piece about it. You know, nice to meet you, John. You know, and it was just that whole experience, and it was terribly uncomfortable because I wanted to ask for the photograph, and I did ultimately. I said, "Do you mind if I photograph you while we shoot?" And that's become my thing now. I was, you know, I found through conversation that you can photograph people once they feel respected and that sort of thing. But that was difficult for me to just, because I mean, we're just talking like you and I are talking, or like we're all talking in here. And then I look outside and I see like, that's your whole life over there living like behind that pole, and everybody's gonna go home and they're gonna have a meal and do this other kind of thing, and you're gonna be catch as catch can. But somehow you felt it important enough to come up and tell me about how the light at the top of the Boeing Tower changes every night, because you see me here with my camera. And asked me for nothing, actually asked me for nothing, but I probably gave him everything I had in my pocket. I was like, you just take it here, just take it. You know, I mean, it was a long drive home, and I, you know, called my wife and talked to her. It was a long drive home, because it was a long kind of intimate conversation. He told me about living with his brother and all this other kind of stuff. When he realized that I realized, right? I didn't actually say, oh, are you homeless, right? But I think he figured out that I figured it out. You know, that he's been living under here, and he can tell me all about the machinations of what's going on up and down the river. That was, you know, and I would do it again, you know, and I have done that, you know, and it always feels weird. You know, I had a guy his name was Obamaja, who was in Wicker Park frequently. And just really quick. So I'm driving down, drop my daughter off at school, and I'm driving down Milwaukee Avenue. And I hear this guy saying something, he's trying to sell stuff. And it sounded like he was saying porn, porn. And I said, who's selling porn at 7:30 in the morning? And no, seriously. And so I do a U-turn. I gotta see what's going on here. He's saying poems. Poems. So I get out and I have this long conversation with him. I even recorded him. It's Obama out of Wicker Park. And we have this long conversation, and he's telling me about his life. And again, it's the same thing. And then I went back to look for him and found out that he passed away shortly after I made those photographs. So I think that you can, like your photographer, you have to, if you're not going to push yourself to do a thing, then what's the point? What's the point? If it doesn't feel uncomfortable, then that's a long answer for that question.
Yes, Laura?
Thank you. So I got chills when you told your story, and if I may, I heard you saying that you were very self-aware, almost self-conscious about not wanting to take from this man. And I don't want to be presumptuous, but I bet you gave him so much because you respected him and you listened to him and you loved him, okay? And you gave him a lot.
And you connected over something that you both found beautiful.
Thank you for that. I am not going to cry up here. I will not. Give me a tissue. I will not. I think that's really what we all want, though. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel when people talk to you about your art and the way it makes them feel. But for me, it never gets old. I could just
special.
It's
special.
It's special. It's like every time someone wants to buy a piece from me, it's like the first time. It's a feeling that just never goes away, because the truth is, I mean, that's, if you create something like that, I think you're just most vulnerable. Conversation is a vulnerable thing, like a real conversation, not, banter. But if you the minute you start sharing something about yourself, you've kind of like, your cards, they're all coming out now. It's you're going to be all the way back to that time that kid took your toy when you were and how you never got over it, which is, I mean, and weirdly, that's the time to make art.
Yeah, that's right.
This sounds like a painting. Keep going.
Any last questions from anyone? Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you so much to my artists. The gallery will be open till 3, and the exhibition will be up until October 29th. And if you're interested in purchase anything, just find me. And also, please consider joining us for some of our other programs that are part of the Smith Symposium series. It includes a screening of an episode of America Outdoors at the Wayfarer Theater in Highland Park this Thursday night at 7. I believe there's still tickets available. And also the Smith Nature Symposium Awards Dinner at Greenbelt Forest Preserve on September 29th, where you'll be able to hear Baratunde Thurston speak. So thank you all so much.